Hi and welcome back. Today I am going to be getting rid of the bolts that I've been using to hold the different parts in place. So I'm going to be riveting in the pivot pins for the levers as well as riveting the springs in place. So after today I'll be starting on the ward box and the key that's going to be operating this mechanism. I've turned these pins from a larger bar. The smaller diameter matches the bolt that I was using to hold everything in place, and the shoulder is going to allow me to rivet the pin solidly to the back plate. So in addition to turning out these pins, I also had to drill out the levers to match the large diameter of this pin. I left the pins a little bit long and I'm filing them to length. I'm just using a scrap piece of the sheet metal that I used for the back plate as a gauge. If you don't have a lathe, you can do the same thing by chucking the stock into the drill press and then using a file to gradually file down the diameter. If you use the corner of the file to get the shoulder mark established, then once that location is established, it's fairly easy to guide the file into the cut and take down whatever it is you need. When I turned these pivot pins, I left the small diameter just a little bit large, so I would need to tap it into place. This just makes setting everything up a lot easier because I need to use a bolster plate to support the top pin while I'm driving in the rivet. The top pin is going to hold a washer that's going to keep the lever in place. You can see how the shoulder for the pivot pin is sitting just a little bit higher than the lever itself, so when I rivet a washer down to that shoulder, it's not going to interfere with the lever and it's going to spin freely, but it'll still hold it in place. The lever for the center bolt is a little bit more complicated because I need to have the lever in place before I can install the pin. If you forget to do that, you're not going to be able to slide the lever over the pin and into the bolt. Once you have that in place, everything else is exactly the same as the first one. The lever for the bolt on the left-hand side of the lock needs to be installed the same way. It has to go in first and then the pin gets installed. And it looks like I can't get this bolster block to fit, so I'm going to need to drill a new hole closer to the corner so I can work around the guide blocks. The two remaining pivot pins are just holding simple levers, so each pin can be riveted in on its own and then the levers just placed over them at any time. The springs need to be riveted to the back plate. I'm only going to be using one rivet because the square pin on the spring locks into the back plate and keeps it from rotating around. So all I need to do is mark the location of the rivet and drill it out. I've blacked out the area around the rivet hole with a Sharpie so I can use a sharp graver to mark the exact location of the hole. Before scribing the location, I just have to make sure that the bolt is fully closed and the spring is touching the lever. So here I'm a little further along and I have all the holes drilled out for the rivets that I need for the springs. I'm going to be using a straight pin as a rivet, and this was just cut from a common nail. When I'm setting a straight rivet, I start by lightly peening over each end of the rivet. This keeps the rivet from falling out, and then once you have that established, then you can start developing a head on each side of the rivet. Before you have the rivet totally locked into position, you want to make sure that it's centered in the plate so you have enough material on each side to develop a good rivet head. And then once the spring's locked in place, you can use a small bending fork to flex the spring and drop the lever into place. The remaining two springs are a little more confined, so you're going to need to switch to a smaller stake anvil to be able to set those rivets. But the process is exactly the same. So now that I have the bolts in place, I can turn my attention back to finishing the push rod and making the key for the lock. Basically, I need to figure out how complicated I want to make this key and the wards that it has to pass through, and I need to figure out what I'm going to add to this push rod so the key can be hooked into the push rod and drive this whole mechanism. But for now, I'm happy that everything's working, and it's good to know that I haven't been wasting my time up to this point. Hi, I'm Dennis, and thanks for watching. If you have questions and you want to contact me directly, you can do so by emailing me at either one of the addresses that I have listed here. It may take me a couple of days, but I will get back to you. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.